Hello, and welcome back to the blisteringly fast McLaren 720S. Now, I know the majority of my videos take place inside a car because my passion is truly trying to convey to you what these things are all about, what it's like to really drive them and how they affect us emotionally. However, there is one thing that I have overlooked with regards to the specification of this particular 720S. Now, as a little bit of backstory, for those of you guys who might be tuning in afresh, welcome and Happy New Year. This car was given to me and the Mr. JWW channel as a long-term car by McLaren Automotive. I collected it towards the end of last year. I've had the car now for around about 3 months and it's been absolutely fantastic. Particularly the way that this thing effortlessly picks up momentum. I don't mean it accelerates quick, I mean this thing sort of levitates across the asphalt. It's frictionless gathering of pace. It blows me away every single time. And it was only a few days ago that I was in it and I had that experience, and it dawned on me that the specification of this car is the lightest possible spec that you can opt a McLaren 720S, which is pretty bonkers. So I thought, in order to highlight what those options are, why don't I give you an in-depth tour as to all of the components that make this thing the lightest 720S ever made. And so here we are. Now we are in the middle of a British winter where the sun is harsh, so you'll have to forgive my evident shadow. But less of that, more about the car. So as I mentioned in the car a second ago, this is, to my knowledge, the lightest specification that you can spec a McLaren 720S. Now, the giveaway on McLaren cars that come from the factory is typically on the number plate. Now, not always, but pretty much if it's a MCL plate, they're normally from the press division of McLaren, but the real giveaway is just underneath the plate here. It's got cars.mclaren.press written, and that's a sure indicator that it is a press car from Woking. Now, I've been living with this, thankfully, since around about September, actually. It's been absolutely incredible. But as I mentioned in the car, the way this thing picks up momentum, truly, I have felt a difference in this car between other 720Ss. Only subtle, but it was a reminder for me that the reason for it is the lightweight specification of the car. Now, this is majoritively down to carbon fibre, so I'm going to go around all of the carbon fibre bits and imagine pretty much every carbon panel that I'm about to show you would otherwise be plastic on the standard car. So let's start from the back, because the back is where most of the sculpture and carbon lies. So you can pretty much look at anything that isn't shrouded by glass, that is black, is now carbon. So these wonderful air intakes here, these swoop down, channel air into cooling ducts. These have been all optioned in carbon fibre, and I think it's not until you get close up on these features that you realise just how much depth and sculpture there is to this car. And then moving over, there's this channel and ducting here. So all of this by standard would typically be some kind of plastic. But the box has been ticked and it's now carbon fibre. And then this huge panel here. Now what I love about this is not only have they applied carbon fibre to this car to make it lightweight, but the construction and the craftsmanship of the carbon is stunning. Look at the join line. Look at this seam here. Now, bearing in mind that most carbon panels are laid by hand, so this is where the skill comes in, and a lot of the time why exposed carbon is so expensive, because there's been so much more manual labor involved to get all of the weaves lined up, making it look pristine. Obviously when it's on the outside of the car, this is really important stuff. And then the extended panel here that goes around the vents, where you can see just subtly inside the engine bay, which at night time glows red, and you can really see the illumination on the designation of the engine. Just down there, look through the mesh, you can see 720S 4-litre twin turbo V8. And then obviously the carbon is replicated on both sides of the car, but it's a real example. Look just how deep that is. I really find that photography never do these cars justice. There's so, look, I fit my whole arm in there. And then moving all the way down to the lower section of the rear, this is where the carbon gets real and massive. Now, one of the iconic features of the 720S is the amount of exposed workings there are in this car. Look, you can just see the back of the gearbox here. But all of this, I have to get in close, This entire diffuser, these strut braces, even the shrouding for the fog light, everything is constructed from carbon fibre. Now sadly today I have driven down some country lanes, and despite the fact that the car was fairly clean when I set off, it's absolutely filthy now, but I'm sure you can appreciate just how big, if I stand back, that carbon area is. So all of this whole back, anything black on the lower half of this car, one piece of carbon fibre. It's amazing. And this also has the optional sports exhaust system, which is indicated by these cool shapes here. Also allows for a little bit more noise both externally and internally inside the cabin. In fact, I shall show you a subtle feature that I don't think has been highlighted that often as to what helps the sound of this car come through to the inside of the car. Because with the sports exhaust, it's not just the exhaust system itself, it's actually a neat little feature on the inside between the seats, which allows you to hear more sound from the exhaust. And then of course, what would a lightweight car be without lightweight alloys? I didn't spec this car. If there was one thing that I would change on the spec of this, it would be the wheels to be black. I think it does look pretty good, but overall there's so many contrasting black panels on the car, I think it would tie it in really nicely if the wheels were black. Other than that, I think the spec's pretty special. And just on the topics of drivetrain and wheel areas, I want to just quickly discuss the incredibly clever suspension of the McLaren 720S. Now, somebody from McLaren once told me that the algorithm that controlled the suspension took years of development, and it was actually through a McLaren-sponsored PhD mathematics student team at the Cambridge University, and they developed a system called optimal control theory, and this uses algorithms to measure and assess inputs from brake, throttle, pitch and yaw. It works in conjunction with accelerometers in the wheels and 2 pressure sensors per damper to ensure that there's optimum contact patch for all 4 tyres. It's absolutely bonkers, and that's one of the unseen things that makes this car drive so spectacularly well. And now onto one of the more controversial specs of this particular McLaren 720S. They've swapped the glass for carbon fibre in the roof. Now obviously glass is one of the heaviest components on a car, but not only have they not gone and just put thinner glass in here, they've removed it entirely and replaced the windows with carbon fibre. Now it's controversial because the doors on the 720S are one of the most iconic features of the car, and not only are they reminiscent of the McLaren F1 that had very similar doors where the roof line actually formed part of the door itself, like so, you can imagine that when that was a window, it just allowed so much more light to cascade inside the cockpit. But on this, we are sacrificing light for lightweight. That's the whole point of this. Now, interestingly, when McLaren launched the 720S, there were launch edition cars, and one of them was a performance pack, and that came as standard. There was no choice but to spec a carbon fibre roof. And I remember customers that had early slots. In fact, I myself had a very early slot on a McLaren 720S. I wanted to go for the performance pack, but I also wanted to keep the glass in the roof. Now, living with this car, it hasn't been a problem, obviously, but as I mentioned, one of the most iconic things about the 720S is these amazing doors. The sculpture and the engineering that has gone into these doors must have taken them forever. One thing that people might not think about is that despite the fact that these doors open like this, there is still the option to have storage inside the doors that doesn't allow anything inside to fall out. So on most cars, storage units like this often just have a hole on top and you can drop things like your sunglasses inside. But of course, when you open the doors, all of the stuff would fall out. So McLaren have come up with this locking mechanism. Upon opening the door, you can no longer, look, that doesn't open. But when you close it, as I'll show you in a minute, you're able to access your goodies inside. It's a really nice feature. But if you've spent any time looking at McLaren F1s, this is straight out of the sketchbook. And it's also a double skinned door. What I mean by that, if I pull this down, that is one of my favourite pieces of sculpture in the automotive world. Look at that. That's a door, guys. Look at it. It's absolutely bonkers. The effect that has, think about a lot of supercars. What you'll often find on the side, and around about here, is a hole as an air intake to channel air into the radiators. But what McLaren have cleverly done is created a double skinned door. So the air is channeled over the front wing of the car and down this massive channel. I mean, I know I keep demonstrating it by fitting my arm inside things, but for me it helps contextualize how deep these things are. And as a result, you're able to have this clean but sculpted side, but without affecting the air intakes. And for those of you guys who haven't seen, there is also no conventional door handle either on a 720S. You have to reach inside and it's just there. And there's a sort of compression pad just there, look, that's it. If I do that, that is the door handle on a 720S. So everything is sort of neatly tucked away. But I remember the first time seeing that, I couldn't stop staring at it. What a door. It's absolutely amazing. Now let's move around to the front of the car, just beginning with the wing mirrors, also clad in a carbon fiber shell. But this is my favorite feature of the entire car, partly because it was so controversial and people didn't really get it until you saw it in person. Now just quickly, let's touch on the lightweightness of it. As you can see, it's entirely constructed from carbon fiber. Now this would conventionally be a more synthetic product, but again, on this car, it's been spec'd with a fully carbon fiber air intake. Now it's weird that I should say air intake, isn't it? Because we're clearly looking at the headlights. But McLaren, being McLaren, designed the headlights to double as the air intake. So if I take you in here, you can see that the radiator sits behind the headlights. It's so bonkers. So that channels in air, and also if I go down towards the lower half of the splitter, that also channels in air. So if that is basically the bottom of the radiator, which finishes up top. What I'm saying is air gets channeled in all the way through this whole area of the car. It really is a genius thing. Now when you stand back from it, I remember when the car launched, people weren't too sure about it, and I totally get that, because it does create this massive void of space on the front of the car where we're so used to seeing more conventional headlights. But it's not until you get up close to it you appreciate what it's there for. And once again, look at the depth of the sculpture. In goes the hand. It's art, it's pure art, and to see this made out of carbon fiber again just is an amazing sight. And once again, continuing on the carbon theme, the whole front splitter, air duct, everything down there, also optioned in carbon fiber. Many lightweight components, and let's finish with these vents on the bonnet here. Also, typically a standard in plastic, but here optioned in carbon. The list goes on. Now, if you think there's carbon on the outside, you should see the inside. First of all, and this might sound strange, I actually want to discuss the speaker system. Now, this is an optional system from Bowers & Wilkins, and it is the lightest stereo ever to be fitted to a McLaren, which is saying something considering one of the standout features of the McLaren F1 was just how well engineered the stereo system was. So the Bowers & Wilkins system is a 1280 watt system, designed entirely from scratch, together in collaboration with McLaren, of course. But what makes it fantastic and very appropriate to the theme of this car is that the components of the speakers use carbon fiber, Kevlar and neodymium, which are all very lightweight components, and as a result it's the lightest audio system ever to appear in a McLaren, which I would guess is the lightest stereo system to appear in anything, right? And while I'm here, let's conveniently talk about that locking mechanism on the door that doesn't allow all of your precious belongings to fall out. So as I mentioned, when the door is up, the compartment automatically locks itself, and then when you close it, opens straight away. No additional playing around. There's like a little strap in there to tie things down. It's actually quite deep. In goes the hand again to demonstrate, but that's a pretty deep compartment, very welcome, and I love how it opens and closes when your door is shut, and then as soon as you open it, it's locked. Nice little feature. And now let's talk about internal carbon, which not only is there lots of it, but it's all satin. Now, the cool thing about this is, and it's the attention to detail of trying to make this car as light as possible, is that of course with the lack of gloss on the carbon, it also makes it a lighter version of carbon fiber as well. So everything inside the car is a matte / satin gloss finish. Now, one of my favorite features of the 720S, and this is actually a standard feature, is how the structural chassis of the car is actually visible within inside the car itself. So what you're seeing there on the A pillar all of that carbon, that isn't an optional extra. You actually see that on every single 720S because that forms the structure of Mono Cage 2, which is the platform that the 720S is built around, and I love how that comes through there. But the optional extras are things like the carbon on the wheel, the carbon shift paddles here, the carbon surrounds around the air vents, and then the extended finish continues all the way down across the side of the tub. And the carbon theme continues on the shrouding around the infotainment screen. And even, subtle details, if I close that, more carbon when the screen folds away on the top. It's endless in here. And of course, it's not just carbon that contributes to the weight saving, it's also materials like Alcantara, of which there is lots of it. The whole central section of the seats, door cards, dashboard, the entire headlining of the roof, and even the boot liner is Alcantara. Okay, so I did say that I would share with you the other feature you get when you spec the optional sports exhaust system. Now, if you look behind this mesh netting here, which is designed to hold things, you see that little panel just there? That there, that's an actual access point to the engine bay behind us here. And the idea is that it channels more sound inside through the engine bay into the cabin through that port there, a sports exhaust port that allows more engine and exhaust noise inside the cabin, and there's one on both sides as well, and they're well hidden because you've got that mesh netting. It's the kind of feature that you would never expect to see, but that's what you do get with the sports exhaust. So there we have it. Now bear in mind that the options on this car are standard tick box options, which is incredible that you can create something so driver focused and lightweight from a car which, let's not forget, was designed to replace the 650S, which is basically their daily driver supercar. The notion that one day that they will create an LT version of the 720S and make it even lighter and even faster blows my mind. I cannot wait for that to be unveiled. Around about February time, I'm going to be having the first drive of the 720 Spider, where we're going to be taking the roof off this thing in Arizona. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time. Ciao.